Former Trump 2016 foreign policy advisor and Newsmax contributor George Papadopoulos. George, great to see you. Thanks for joining us this Friday.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the visit. It was much anticipated, and now it is here. Of course, outside of oil, we don't expect him to talk about Khashoggi. Probably a good idea since this relationship really has been somewhat frosty. What do you think right now that President Biden can do to have any positive outcome after this meeting? Obviously, it's very different from when Trump was in Saudi.
Of course, and I was very pleased to see that the Biden administration has not abandoned the Abraham Accords that were the historic peace agreement in which the Trump administration brokered between Israel and numerous Arab states, which was unprecedented up until the Trump administration took office. Now, of course, Saudi Arabia is not a party to the Abraham Accords. However, there are, of course, unverified rumors and high-level security meetings that have been taking place between both Israel and Saudi Arabia over the past 5 years or so, because they share a common enemy, which is an enemy of the United States. It's an enemy of regional peace and stability, and it's a pariah on the international stage, and that is Iran, under the theocratic regime that currently governs that country. President Trump, of course, was absolutely correct in which he believed that you can only have peace through strength. He drew red lines in which the Iranians were made to believe that if they did cross those lines, like they did when they attacked American troops in Iraq, that there would be an onslaught against their commanders, in which we saw their top-ranking officials assassinated on the ground due to airstrikes. So I think President Biden during this trip, of course, has to show respect to the Crown Prince. He is the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. He is going to have to begin to discuss not only with the Saudis about ramping up oil production, but also our American CEOs back at home, because while Saudi Arabia is one of the only few countries that has production capabilities, it's not going to be enough to offset the high oil prices that we're seeing today.
George, we heard that soundbite from President Biden talking about his desire to see a two-state solution here. You know, that's fine. That's the traditional kind of statement that you make if you're the American president. But what we don't see President Biden willing to admit is that the Palestinian Authority really doesn't have any authority among the Palestinian people. And that's what President Trump seemed to realize with the Abraham Accords. You have to negotiate around the Palestinian Authority. Joe Biden obviously isn't into that idea.
Absolutely. And for years, John, there was this disabused foreign policy that completely failed in their effort to bring peace to the Middle East. And it was based upon a condition that you needed peace between Israel and the Palestinians in order to then have peace between Israel and Arab states in general. That, of course, was completely upended due to the Abraham Accords. And we are beginning to see that President Biden himself, during his statements that he just gave today or yesterday, that this is not a ripe time for peace or a two-state solution that can be forced upon both the Israelis and the Palestinians from a third party, let alone a country which is run by President Biden, who really has ruffled feathers during the campaign. He wasn't friendly towards Israel. Of course, we know the partisan elements in the Democrat Party today are extremely hostile towards any support towards Israel. We know of his statements towards the crown king and the crown prince, I should say, in Saudi Arabia about the assassination of Khashoggi. So it's going to take him a lot of time to build trust. And of course, by being at step one in building that trust once again that President Trump already had with Israel and Saudi Arabia, he's not going to be able to negotiate a historic peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think he understands that. He needs to focus right now on building on the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, and they still want to push this Iran deal, although everyone in the Middle East does not want that. And, you know, Saudi Arabia in particular, because of the proxy war with Iran and the Houthi rebels there. So how does President Biden work around that?
Look, Iran today is the world's largest state sponsor of terror. Where Iran spreads its tentacles throughout the Middle East, you see American soldiers coming back in coffins and with American flags draped over them. That's exactly why the United States under the Trump administration understood that you cannot be weak with the Iranian regime. You cannot force yourself to negotiate from a position of weakness the way the Biden administration is yet again following the footsteps of the Obama administration in trying to rush a new Iran nuclear deal. Our European allies, our Middle Eastern allies are all coming to the terms that Iran today under the theocratic regime is not a responsible actor in the international system. Our allies in the Middle East are coalescing together and working together for the first time in history because they understand what present danger Iran presents to not only their region, but to the entire world. And this is something that the Biden administration has to focus on while in Saudi Arabia today.
Let's hope he can finish on a strong note. I mean, from walking off the red carpet when he first got to Israel to walking off the stage, God knows where he was going. And then there was that gaffe that he had on stage as well, where he talked about the honor of the Holocaust and saying, instead of saying the horror of the Holocaust. You got to give a hat tip to the Israelis. Very graceful as hosts of Joe Biden, considering he's been pretty adversarial to that country. But that really speaks more to our country, I think, and the relationship between those two countries than the Joe Biden presidency. George Papadopoulos, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, George.